When you picture D-Day, what do you see? Soldiers pouring out of landing craft, tanks hitting the beaches under fire. It's an iconic image of World War II, but have you ever stopped to think about the incredible machines that made it all possible? These weren't just simple boats, they were a revolutionary class of military hardware, the amphibious vehicles. Today we're rediving deep into the history of every single type of amphibious vehicle used in World War II, from the famous Higgins boat to the bizarre and brilliant designs you've probably never heard of. Get ready, because this is the story of how engineers and soldiers conquered the coastlines. Let's start with the most famous of them all, the landing craft. Vehicle, personnel or LCVP, better known as the Higgins boat. Designed by Andrew Higgins in New Orleans. This flat-bottomed plywood boat could carry 36 fully equipped soldiers right onto the beach. Its most ingenious feature was the bow ramp. Soldiers didn't have to clamber over the sides. They could charge straight out the front, ready for action. Over 20,000 of these were built, and Dwight D. Eisenhower himself said Higgins was the man who won the war for us. Without the LCVP, the entire strategy for D-Day would have been impossible. It was the workhorse that delivered the Allied armies to the shores of Fortress Europe. But what about getting heavier equipment ashore? That's where the landing craft, tank or LCT comes in. These were much larger steel-hulled vessels designed to carry multiple tanks, trucks and artillery pieces. Imagine the scene: a massive front ramp drops, and out rolls a 30-ton Sherman tank, its gun already blazing. LCTs came in various sizes, with the British-designed Mark V and the American Mark VI being the most common. They were slow, clumsy, and not exactly comfortable for the crew. But they were absolutely essential for bringing the heavy firepower needed to break through enemy defenses. They were the floating garages that armed the invasion force. Now, let's talk about a vehicle that could do both: swim and drive. I'm talking about the DUKW, affectionately known as the Duck. Based on a standard GMC 2.5-ton truck, the DUKW was encased in a watertight steel hull and fitted with a propeller at the back. It could drive off a transport ship, motor its way to shore with up to 25 soldiers or 5,000 pounds of cargo, and then simply drive up the beach and onto the road network. This ability to transition seamlessly from sea to land made it one of the most versatile vehicles of the war, crucial for logistics and keeping the front line supplied, especially in the early days of an invasion before proper ports could be captured. The Duck was a true marvel of wartime ingenuity. Moving up in size, we have the landing vehicle, tracked or LVT. Unlike the Duck, the LVT was a fully tracked vehicle, essentially a swimming tank. Early versions, called alligators, were purely for cargo, but it didn't take long for the military to see their potential. They added armor and machine guns, turning them into amphibious assault vehicles. The LVT for Water Buffalo was a game changer. It had a large ramp at the rear, allowing troops and even small vehicles like jeeps to exit quickly under cover. These were used extensively by the U.S. Marines in the brutal island-hopping campaigns of the Pacific, navigating treacherous coral reefs that would have stopped any conventional landing craft. But what if you needed to land an even bigger tank? Enter the Sherman DD, which stands for duplex drive. This was one of the most secret and clever inventions of the war. It was a standard M for Sherman tank fitted with a large collapsible waterproof canvas screen. When raised, this screen displaced enough water to make the 33-ton tank float. Two propellers at the rear, powered by the tank's own engine, pushed it through the water. Once ashore, the crew would drop the screen and the tank was ready to fight. It was a brilliant idea, but tragically it had a flawed debut at Omaha Beach on D-Day. Rough seas swamped many of the DDs, sending them to the bottom before they even reached the shore. However, on other beaches with calmer waters, they were incredibly effective, providing crucial fire support in the first waves of the assault. The Germans had their own amphibious designs, too. The most well-known is the Schwimmwagen, a four-wheel drive amphibious car based on the Volkswagen Beetle. It was light, nimble, and surprisingly effective. A hinged propeller at the rear could be lowered into the water, and the front wheels acted as rudders for steering. While it couldn't handle rough seas, it was perfect for crossing rivers and lakes on the Eastern Front, giving German reconnaissance units a huge mobility advantage. Over 14,000 were produced, making it the most mass-produced amphibious car in history. It was a simple, rugged, and reliable piece of German engineering. Another German effort was the Landwasserschlepper, or LWS. This was a much larger tracked amphibious tractor designed to tow unpowered barges and vehicles across water and onto beaches. It looked like a bizarre motorboat with tracks. While several prototypes were built and saw limited service, the project was never a high priority for the German High Command, and it never achieved the mass production scale of its Allied counterparts. It remains a fascinating what-if of World War II technology. Let's head back to the Allies and look at some of the lesser-known craft. Have you heard of the Terrapin? This was a British 8-wheeled amphibious truck, similar in concept to the American DUKW but with a very different design. It was larger, had 2 engines, and could carry a 5-ton load. Its 8-wheel drive gave it excellent performance on soft sand, but it was complex and had some steering issues in the water. It served well, particularly during the Battle of the Scheldt, helping to keep supplies flowing in incredibly difficult, waterlogged terrain. Then there was the Seep, the amphibious version of the iconic Jeep. Its official name was the Ford GPA. The idea was great, a small, gunny-ware scout vehicle that could also swim. In practice, however, it was a bit of a disappointment. It was slow and unwieldy in the water, and its extra weight made it less capable off-road than a standard Jeep. While the US Army lost interest fairly quickly, many were sent to the Soviet Union under the Lend-Lease program, where they proved very useful for river crossings on the vast Eastern Front. Finally, we have the behemoths of amphibious warfare, the landing ship, tank, or LST. These were massive ocean-going ships that could carry an entire company of tanks, dozens of trucks, and hundreds of troops. Their defining feature was a huge pair of bow doors and a ramp that allowed vehicles to drive directly onto a beach. LSTs could simply run themselves aground, unload their cargo, and then use a stern anchor to pull themselves back off the beach. Churchill famously called them the maids of all work. They formed the backbone of the Allied logistical chain, carrying the bulk of the invasion forces across the English Channel and the Pacific Ocean.